The truth that changed my life was hiding in plain sight beneath a blue hospital uniform, and I had no idea that one ordinary night shift was about to connect me to the most powerful man in New York. The fluorescent lights above the emergency department buzzed softly as I rubbed my tired eyes and checked the clock for what felt like the 100th time that night. It was 2:17 a.m. My feet ached. My shoulders felt like concrete. And the coffee sitting beside the nurse's station had gone cold nearly an hour ago. Another overnight shift. Another endless parade of emergencies, worried families, and paperwork that never seemed to end. I was 27 years old, working at St. Matthew's Medical Center in Manhattan, and sometimes it felt like I lived beneath those bright white lights more than I lived anywhere else. Around me, monitors beeped in steady rhythms. Phones rang. Stretchers rolled across polished floors. The controlled chaos of the emergency room never truly stopped. It only changed shape. I glanced down at my uniform and adjusted the sleeve covering my left wrist. The silver bracelet hidden beneath the fabric pressed lightly against my skin. I had worn it for as long as I could remember. It was old, scratched in places, and worth almost nothing to anyone else. But somehow I never took it off. Not even during surgery rotations. Not even while sleeping. Something about it felt important, though I could never explain why. A loud set of doors burst open across the department, instantly changing the atmosphere. Several paramedics rushed inside, pushing a stretcher. Conversations stopped. Nurses moved. Doctors looked up. The energy shifted the way it always did when something serious arrived. I grabbed a chart and hurried toward the trauma bay. The patient was a man in his late 50s wearing an expensive suit beneath a dark overcoat. His face was pale. His breathing was shallow. Two paramedics exchanged quick updates with the attending physician while the rest of us prepared equipment. I stepped to the bedside and began checking vital signs. The man's watch alone probably cost more than my car. Not that it mattered. In the emergency room, money disappeared. Everyone became simply another patient who needed help. We worked quickly and quietly. The room filled with focused voices and precise movements. Minutes passed. The patient stabilized. Relief spread through the staff like a shared exhale. I finally stepped back and removed my gloves. That should have been the end of it. Just another patient. Just another night. Then the elevators opened. At first, I noticed the security detail. Four men in tailored black suits moved through the hallway with calm efficiency. Not hospital security. Something different. Something private. People instinctively stepped aside as they passed. And then I saw him. He walked between them without hurrying. Tall. Broad-shouldered, dark hair neatly combed back. A charcoal overcoat draped perfectly across his frame. He looked like someone accustomed to being obeyed without ever raising his voice. The hallway seemed quieter around him, as if the building itself recognized his presence. One of the doctors near me suddenly straightened his posture. Another nurse lowered her voice. I had no idea who the man was, but everyone else seemed to know. His green eyes swept across the emergency department, evaluating everything in seconds. Then they landed on the patient inside the room. Concern flashed briefly across his face before disappearing behind perfect control. Whoever he was, he cared about the man we had just treated. I turned away and returned to my charting. My shift wasn't over. My responsibilities hadn't changed. But for reasons I couldn't explain, I felt those eyes find me for the briefest moment before moving on. And somewhere beneath my uniform sleeve, the old silver bracelet suddenly felt heavier than it ever had before. I told myself I was imagining it. Hospitals attracted important people every day. Politicians, athletes, CEOs. Wealth had a way of finding its own private entrance into places where everyone else waited in line. Still, something about that man lingered in the back of my mind long after I returned to the nurse's station. I focused on my charting, vital signs, medication records, discharge notes. The familiar routine usually helped me shut everything else out. Tonight, it did not. Across the department, I could occasionally see members of the security team standing quietly outside the patient's room. They never spoke loudly, never appeared nervous. They simply watched. The kind of people who looked prepared for anything. Around 3 o'clock, I was updating a file when Dr. Reynolds approached. His expression carried the exhaustion that came with working emergency medicine for 20 years. "Emily, Room 12 needs another assessment before we move him upstairs." I nodded and grabbed my tablet. The patient had improved significantly over the last hour. His color looked better. His breathing was steady. When I entered the room, he was awake and speaking quietly with someone seated beside the bed. For a moment, I froze. The man from the hallway looked up as I walked in. Up close, he seemed even more composed. Not intimidating in an obvious way. There was no raised voice, no arrogance, just a calm certainty that made everyone around him seem slightly less important. His green eyes followed my movement as I checked the monitors. "How are you feeling tonight, Mr. Bennett?" I asked the patient. "Much better thanks to you people," he replied with a tired smile. My boss was convinced the world was ending. A faint smile touched the corner of the other man's mouth. "I prefer preparation over panic," he said. His voice was deep and controlled, the kind of voice that never needed to repeat itself. I entered the updated readings into the tablet. Professional, focused, determined not to stare. "Your numbers look good. We should have you settled upstairs shortly." "Thank you, Miss Carter," the patient said. Hearing my last name made me glance up. The man sitting beside him was already watching me. Not rudely, not aggressively, simply observing, like he was trying to remember something. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Then his gaze dropped briefly to my wrist. The movement lasted less than a second, but it was enough, because at that exact moment, my sleeve had shifted. The silver bracelet was visible. I watched something change in his expression. Not fear, not surprise, something deeper. The room seemed to go completely still. His eyes locked onto the bracelet. Every trace of casual conversation disappeared from his face. "Where did you get that?" he asked quietly. The question caught me off guard. Instinctively, I pulled my sleeve down. "Excuse me." His attention never left my wrist. "That bracelet." The patient looked between us with visible confusion. Damien. The name registered immediately. Damien. So that was who he was. Damien Romano. Even I had heard the name before. Most New Yorkers had. But Damien did not answer his employee. His focus remained entirely on me. I swallowed. I have had it my whole life. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Damien Romano leaned back slowly in his chair. His expression became unreadable again. Perfectly controlled. Perfectly calm. But something told me the conversation was far from over. And as I left the room, I could still feel his eyes following me. For the first time in years, I found myself wondering about the bracelet too. The rest of my shift passed in a blur, but my concentration never fully returned. Every time I reached for a chart or answered a call light, I found myself replaying that moment in room 12. The way Damien Romano had looked at the bracelet. The way his voice had changed when he asked about it. Most people never noticed it. Patients did not notice it. Doctors did not notice it. Even my closest friends rarely mentioned it anymore. Yet somehow he had spotted it immediately. By 6 o'clock in the morning, the first pale hints of sunrise were beginning to appear beyond the hospital windows. Manhattan looked softer at dawn. Less crowded. Less rushed. For a few brief minutes, the city almost seemed peaceful. I finished my final reports and gathered my things from the locker room. My shoulders felt heavy. My eyes burned from exhaustion. All I wanted was a hot shower and 6 uninterrupted hours of sleep. Outside, the morning air carried the chill of early spring. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself and started toward the parking garage 3 blocks away. The streets were beginning to wake up. Delivery trucks rumbled past. Coffee shops unlocked their doors. Commuters hurried toward subway entrances with paper cups in their hands. Everything felt normal, comfortingly normal, until I reached my car. I stopped. Something was wrong. At first, I could not identify what had caught my attention. Then I saw it. The driver's side door was not fully closed, just slightly open, maybe an inch. My stomach tightened instantly. I was careful with my car, almost obsessively careful. I never left doors unlocked. Never. I stood frozen for several seconds, staring at the gap. Maybe I had forgotten. Maybe I was simply tired. Yet deep down, I knew better. Slowly, I approached. My heartbeat grew louder with every step. The parking garage suddenly felt much too quiet. When I reached the vehicle, I pulled the door open completely and looked inside. Nothing appeared damaged. Nothing appeared stolen. The seats were untouched. The dashboard looked normal. My emergency kit sat exactly where I had left it. Confusion replaced fear. Why would someone open my car and take nothing? Then I noticed the glove compartment. It was slightly open. I frowned and reached inside. Registration papers. Insurance documents. Maintenance records. Everything seemed present. Except one thing. The old photograph I kept tucked between two folders was gone. My breath caught. It was not an important photograph to anyone else. Just a faded picture of me as a little girl standing beside a woman whose face I could barely remember. The only image I had from before I entered foster care. The only image that connected me to a past I had never fully understood. Someone had opened my car. Someone had searched through my belongings. And the only thing missing was that photograph. A cold sensation settled over me. I looked around the garage. Concrete pillars. Empty spaces. Fluorescent lights humming overhead. No movement. No witnesses. Nothing. Yet for the first time in years, I felt as though an invisible door had opened somewhere behind me. As though someone had been quietly watching my life from a distance and had finally decided to step closer. My phone suddenly vibrated in my coat pocket, making me jump. The screen lit up with an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello. Silence greeted me for 2 seconds. Then a calm male voice spoke. Miss Carter, I apologize for contacting you unexpectedly. My grip tightened around the phone. I recognized the voice immediately. Damian Romano. There is something important we need to discuss, he said. And for reasons I could not explain, I knew he was not talking about the bracelet anymore. I should have hung up. Any reasonable person would have. Instead, I stood beside my car in the nearly empty garage with my pulse pounding in my ears and listened to the silence on the other end of the line. How did you get my number? I asked. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Hospital records are surprisingly easy to access when people stop asking questions, Damian replied. There was no arrogance in his tone, no attempt to impress me. Somehow that made the answer even more unsettling. I glanced over my shoulder. Rows of parked vehicles sat beneath the fluorescent lights. Everything looked ordinary. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. What exactly do you want to discuss? I asked. A brief pause followed. Not over the phone. My stomach tightened. Then I am not interested. Miss Carter. His voice remained calm. Did anything unusual happen after your shift ended? The question froze me in place. I looked down at the open glove compartment. The missing photograph. The unanswered questions spinning through my mind. Why would you ask that? Another pause. Longer this time. Because someone has been asking questions about you. The cool morning air suddenly felt colder. What kind of questions? The kind that concerned me. I closed my eyes for a second. None of this made sense. Less than 12 hours earlier, Damian Romano had been a stranger. Now he was calling me as if he already knew pieces of my life that I did not understand myself. You are not making any sense, I said quietly. Then let me try something simpler. His voice softened slightly. Do you know where you were born? I frowned. Boston. Are you certain? The answer came automatically, then stopped. Because the truth was, I was not certain. The foster records I had seen over the years were incomplete. Some pages were missing. Some dates never matched. Whenever I asked questions, nobody seemed to have answers. Why are you asking me this? I whispered. Because I think someone spent a great deal of effort making sure you would never ask those questions yourself. My heart skipped. The noise of the garage disappeared. The distant traffic. The ventilation fans. Everything faded behind those words. You are wrong, I said, though I no longer sounded convinced. I hope I am. For the first time, I heard something human beneath his control. Something almost troubled. But I do not think I am. Another silence settled between us. Then he spoke again. Look inside the passenger seat. Confusion washed over me. Slowly, I turned. Sitting on the seat beside me was a cream-colored envelope. I knew immediately it had not been there earlier. My pulse accelerated. What is that? I asked. Open it. My fingers trembled as I reached through the open door and picked it up. The envelope was unsealed. Inside rested a single photograph. I pulled it out and stared. My breath caught instantly. It was the same photograph that had disappeared from my glove compartment. The same little girl. The same woman standing beside her. Except this version was larger, clearer, restored. Details that had been blurred for years suddenly appeared in sharp focus. And written neatly across the bottom corner were 3 words I had never seen before. Emily Grace Romano. My hands would not stop shaking. I stared at the photograph as though looking at it long enough might force it to become something else. A mistake. A coincidence. A cruel joke. Anything except what it appeared to be. Emily Grace Romano. The name felt foreign. Wrong. Yet I could not look away from it. What is this? I whispered into the phone. Across the line, Damian remained silent for several seconds. That is what I have been trying to determine. I leaned against the side of my car because my knees suddenly felt weak. The woman in the photograph looked younger than I remembered. Her smile carried a warmth that stirred something deep inside me. A memory that refused to fully surface. The scent of perfume. A lullaby. A pair of gentle hands fixing a blanket around my shoulders. Tiny fragments drifted through my mind before disappearing again. Who is she? I asked. Her name was Sofia Romano. My breath caught. The word escaped before I could stop it. Another pause followed. She was a member of my family. The garage seemed to tilt slightly around me. Family. Romano. The same name written beneath the photograph. The same name belonging to the man on the phone. None of it felt real. You think I am related to you? I asked. I think someone spent 20 years making certain nobody could answer that question. His honesty unsettled me more than certainty would have. He was not claiming to know the truth. He was admitting he did not. Yet somehow that made everything feel more dangerous. I closed my eyes and pressed my fingers against my forehead. Exhaustion weighed heavily behind my eyes. The overnight shift. The missing photograph. The mysterious phone call. It all felt like too much. I need time to think. You do. His voice softened slightly. But you should not be alone right now. My eyes opened immediately. What does that mean? It means whoever searched your car was looking for the same answers I am. A chill ran through me. I looked around the garage again. Every parked vehicle suddenly seemed suspicious. Every shadow seemed deeper than before. You do not know that. I rarely make assumptions. The calm certainty in his voice made it difficult to argue. Then tell me what you know. Very little. I heard movement on his end of the call. A door closing somewhere. But enough to know that your photograph was not the only thing someone was searching for. My grip tightened around the phone. What else? You. The word landed like a stone in my chest. Silence followed. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Real. Then Damien spoke again. Go home, Emily. Lock your door. Get some sleep if you can. I will contact you later. Wait. The word came out before I could stop it. Why are you helping me? For the first time since the conversation began, his answer was not immediate. When he finally spoke, his voice carried something unfamiliar. Something almost personal. Because when I saw that bracelet, I remembered a promise that was made a very long time ago. Before I could ask another question, the line disconnected. I stood alone in the garage holding the photograph against my chest. And for the first time in my life, I wondered whether Emily Carter had ever truly existed at all. Sleep never came. I made it back to my apartment just after 7 in the morning, locked the door behind me, and stood in the middle of my living room staring at the photograph. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in narrow bands across the hardwood floor. Usually, this place felt safe. Small. Predictable. Today it felt unfamiliar. I placed the photograph on the kitchen counter and removed my coat. Then I pulled the bracelet from beneath my sleeve and examined it more closely than I ever had before. The silver surface showed years of wear. Tiny scratches covered the metal. On the inside edge, barely visible, I noticed something I had somehow never paid attention to. A small engraved symbol. My pulse quickened. I carried it to the window and tilted it toward the light. The engraving resembled a crest. A letter are intertwined with a rose. Romano. The realization sent a chill through me. I sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Questions multiplied faster than answers. If the bracelet belonged to that family, why had I spent my entire life believing I was someone else? Why did my foster records never mention any of this? And why was someone suddenly searching for clues connected to my past? Exhaustion eventually dragged me into an uneasy sleep. When I woke, the room had grown darker. Evening shadows stretched across the walls. For a moment, I forgot everything. Then my eyes landed on the photograph, and reality came rushing back. My phone showed 3 missed calls from the hospital and 1 text message from my friend Rachel asking if I wanted dinner after my next shift. Normal life continued moving forward while mine seemed to have stopped entirely. I walked to the bookshelf near the couch and pulled down a small storage box. Inside were the few items I had carried through every stage of my life. Foster paperwork, school records, adoption forms, birthday cards, documents I had not examined in years. I spread them across the table and began reading. At first, nothing stood out. Then I noticed it. An intake form from my earliest foster placement listed my arrival date. Another document recorded a different date entirely. Nearly 8 months separated them. I checked again. The discrepancy remained. My breathing slowed. then accelerated. Another folder revealed a medical record with information blacked out beneath a legal privacy stamp. Why would records involving a 6-year-old child require redactions? The deeper I looked, the stranger everything became. Missing pages, incomplete signatures, references to files that were no longer attached. It was as if someone had carefully removed pieces of my history while leaving enough behind to avoid suspicion. A sudden knock at the door shattered the silence. I froze. The sound came again. 3 calm knocks. Not aggressive, not hurried. My apartment felt impossibly quiet. Slowly, I approached the door and looked through the peephole. My heart nearly stopped. Damian Romano stood alone in the hallway wearing a dark overcoat. One hand rested casually in his pocket. The other held a thin manila folder. He looked directly toward the door as though he already knew I was watching. Then he spoke through the wood in a calm, steady voice. "Emily, I found something you need to see." For several seconds, I did not move. My hand rested on the doorknob while my heart pounded against my ribs. Every instinct told me not to open the door. I barely knew Damian Romano. Everything that had happened over the past 24 hours had made my life feel less stable, not more. Yet another part of me knew I would never sleep peacefully again if I turned him away now. Slowly, I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. Damian stood exactly where I had seen him through the peephole. Tall, composed, calm in a way that felt almost unnatural. The hallway light cast soft shadows across his face, but his green eyes remained focused entirely on me. He glanced briefly at the papers scattered across my dining table behind me and nodded once. "I see you have been doing your own investigation." I folded my arms across my chest. "You seem surprised." "No." His gaze shifted toward the documents. "Only relieved." Before I could respond, he extended the manila folder. I hesitated before taking it. The folder felt heavier than it should have. "What is this?" I asked. "A record that was supposed to disappear 20 years ago." The answer sent a chill through me. I stepped aside without thinking. Damian entered the apartment quietly. He did not wander. He did not inspect anything. He simply stood near the table while I opened the folder. Inside rested several pages and one photograph. My breath caught instantly. The photograph showed a large estate surrounded by trees. Standing in front of the entrance was the same woman from my childhood picture, Sofia Romano. Beside her stood a young man who looked strikingly familiar. Dark hair, green eyes, the same features Damian carried today, only younger. I looked up. "That is you." He nodded. I was 14. My eyes dropped back to the image. Near the edge of the photograph stood a little girl. Her face was partially turned away from the camera, but I recognized the silver bracelet immediately. My bracelet. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I lowered myself into a chair. "That is impossible." Damian remained standing. I thought so too. My eyes scanned the image again and again. The bracelet, the woman, the estate. Every detail chipped away at the life I thought I understood. Who was she to me? I asked quietly. Damian looked at the photograph for a long moment before answering. "That is the question I have spent 2 decades trying to answer." Silence settled between us. Outside, distant traffic drifted through the city night. Inside, neither of us moved. Finally, I looked down at the remaining documents. One page appeared older than the others. Official. Typed. A heading across the top immediately drew my attention. Child Protective Services Temporary Placement Record. Beneath it sat a name. Not Emily Carter. Not Emily Grace Romano. A completely different name. My hands trembled as I read it. Then I noticed the date. The placement record had been created 3 years before the earliest foster document I possessed. 3 years. 3 entire years of my life were missing. I looked up at Damian. For the first time since meeting him, uncertainty appeared in his expression. "Emily," he said quietly, "I do not think your story begins where you were told it begins." The words lingered in the air long after Damian spoke them. I stared at the document in front of me, reading the unfamiliar name over and over again. It should have meant nothing. Instead, it felt strangely familiar, like hearing a song from childhood that I could not quite place. My fingers tightened around the edge of the paper. "Who is this?" I asked quietly. Damian pulled out the chair across from me and sat down for the first time since entering the apartment. "I do not know." His answer frustrated me more than certainty would have. "You keep bringing me pieces of my life and then telling me you do not know what they mean." His gaze remained steady. Because I would rather tell you the truth than invent one. I wanted to argue. I wanted to be angry. Instead, I looked back down at the documents. Deep inside, I knew he was right. Every answer so far had only led to more questions. A soft vibration interrupted the silence. My phone lit up on the table. Rachel's name appeared on the screen. Relief washed through me for half a second. Something normal. Something familiar. I answered immediately. Rachel. Her voice sounded rushed. Emily, where are you? At home. Good. She paused. Listen, this is going to sound strange. My stomach tightened. What happened? Someone came to the hospital asking about you. I glanced toward Damien. His expression changed instantly. Not fear. Focus. Who? I asked. I do not know. The front desk called me because they thought it was weird. The man did not ask about your schedule or contact information. He asked whether you still worked there and whether anyone knew where you lived. Every muscle in my body went rigid. Rachel continued before I could respond. Emily, are you okay? Yes. The answer came automatically, though I was no longer sure it was true. After reassuring her and ending the call, I lowered the phone slowly. The apartment suddenly felt much smaller. Damien leaned back slightly. That confirms it. Confirms what? Someone is actively looking for you. I stood and walked toward the window. Below, New York moved as it always did. Headlights flowed through the streets. People hurried along sidewalks. Restaurants glowed with warm evening light. Millions of lives continued normally, while mine seemed to be unraveling. Why now? I whispered. If someone wanted to find me, why wait 20 years? Damien did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before. Because until recently, they may have believed you were impossible to find. I turned toward him. And what changed? His eyes drifted to the bracelet on my wrist. You did. The answer made no sense. Yet something about the way he said it made my pulse quicken. Then Damien reached into his coat and removed a small envelope. He placed it on the table between us. This arrived at my office 3 hours ago. I picked it up carefully. There was no return address. No stamp. Only a single sheet of paper inside. My breath caught as I unfolded it. 3 words had been typed across the center of the page. We know she survived. The room went completely silent. The paper felt strangely heavy in my hands despite weighing almost nothing. 3 words. Simple words. Yet they carried enough weight to make the room feel colder. We know she survived. I read them again. Then again, hoping the meaning would somehow change. It did not. Who sent this? I asked quietly. Damien shook his head. No signature. No fingerprints. It was delivered by courier to one of my offices this afternoon. I lowered the page carefully onto the table. My pulse refused to slow. Then they know about me. Yes. His answer came immediately. And now they know that I know about you. The realization settled heavily between us. Outside the apartment, a siren echoed somewhere in the distance before fading into the night. I stared at the city lights beyond the window. For 27 years, my life had been ordinary. Nursing school, long shifts, rent payments, grocery lists, coffee that was always too cold by the end of a shift. Now complete strangers were searching for me, and pieces of my past were appearing faster than I could understand them. Tell me everything, I said. Damien remained silent for several moments. Then he stood and walked toward the window. 20 years ago, members of my family disappeared from public records almost overnight. Certain names were erased. Certain files vanished. Most people accepted the official explanations and moved on. He turned slightly toward me. I never did. The city lights reflected faintly in his eyes. Sophia Romano was one of those people. I glanced at the photograph on the table. You said she was family. She was my aunt. The answer sent another ripple through my chest. Damien continued. She was intelligent. Careful. She documented everything. Which is why her disappearance never made sense to me. I listened quietly. For years, I searched for records connected to her. Most had been removed. Some were altered. But every few years I would find a small inconsistency. A missing page. An unexplained transfer. A financial record that should not exist. He looked directly at me. Then 3 nights ago, I saw your bracelet. My hand instinctively moved to my wrist. The silver band felt warmer somehow. More real. And you recognized it? Immediately. His voice remained calm, but I could hear certainty beneath it. Sophia wore the same crest on a necklace. It belonged to only one branch of the family. Silence filled the apartment. I wanted answers. Instead, I found more mysteries. Then my phone vibrated again. Both of us looked down at the screen. An unknown number. My stomach tightened. Slowly, I answered. Hello. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then a woman's voice emerged. Soft. Older. Trembling slightly. Emily. I froze. Something about the voice felt familiar. Not recognizable. Familiar. Like a memory hiding just beyond reach. Who is this? I asked. The woman inhaled sharply. I heard emotion in that breath. Years of emotion. My name is Margaret Hayes. Another pause followed. And I was there the day they brought you to foster care. The room went completely silent. Even Damien stopped moving. Then the woman spoke 7 words that changed everything. Emily, the name on your records is wrong. The blood seemed to drain from my face. I gripped the phone tighter as Margaret Hayes's words echoed through my mind. The name on your records is wrong. Across the room, Damien watched me carefully, reading my expression without interrupting. What do you mean? I asked. My voice barely sounded like my own. On the other end of the line, I heard the woman take a slow breath. I worked with child placement services 20 years ago. I was not supposed to contact you. I promised myself I never would. But after seeing your picture on the news coverage from the hospital fundraiser last week, I could not stay silent anymore. Confusion washed over me. I have never been on the news. Not directly, she replied. You appeared in the background of a charity event photograph. I recognized the bracelet immediately. My hand moved instinctively to my wrist. The silver band suddenly felt heavier than ever. Tell me the truth, I whispered. Another pause followed. Then Margaret spoke carefully, as if choosing every word. The child who arrived at our office was carrying documents that did not match her identification file. Someone corrected the records before the system could process them. At the time, I believed it was an administrative mistake. Years later, I realized it was not. Damien stepped closer. His attention sharpened instantly. What was the original name? I asked. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear anything else. Margaret hesitated. I cannot say it over the phone. Frustration surged through me. You called me. Because you need to know that somebody altered your history deliberately. Her voice trembled slightly. And because 2 days ago, someone came asking me questions about you. The room went silent again. Damien's jaw tightened. What kind of questions? I asked. Whether I remembered a little girl with a bracelet. Whether I had kept any records. Whether I had ever spoken to anyone about what happened. Fear slipped into her voice. Genuine fear. Emily, I think they are trying to clean up old mistakes. My stomach turned. For years, I had believed my missing history was the result of neglect, bureaucracy, or bad record-keeping. Now it sounded intentional, planned, controlled. Do you still have the original files? Damien asked quietly. Margaret answered immediately. No, but I know someone who might. Hope flickered through me for the first time all evening. Who? Another brief silence followed. A retired family court judge in Connecticut. He handled several sealed cases connected to your placement. If anyone knows what really happened, it is him. I exchanged a glance with Damien. For the first time since this nightmare began, we had something concrete. A person, a lead, a direction. Then Margaret said something that made every hair on my arm stand up. There is one more thing. My pulse accelerated again. What? Her voice dropped to a whisper. The little girl who arrived at our office 20 years ago was not alone. She had an older boy with her. And according to the original intake notes, he refused to leave her side. I looked at Damien. His expression had gone completely still. What happened to him? I asked. Margaret's answer came softly. That is the one part of the file that disappeared completely. After the call ended, nobody spoke for several seconds. The silence felt heavier than any answer we had received so far. An older boy. The words echoed through my mind. Somewhere in the missing years of my life, there had been someone else. Someone who had known me before the records changed. Before the names changed. Before I became Emily Carter. I slowly lowered the phone onto the table and looked at Damien. He was staring at the photograph of Sophia Romano with an expression I had never seen before. Not anger. Not control. Recognition. You know something? I said quietly. His eyes lifted toward mine. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he walked toward the window and folded his arms. When I was 14, my aunt disappeared. His voice remained calm, but I could hear the strain beneath it. A few days before that happened, she came to visit my family estate. I listened carefully. Every instinct told me this mattered. She brought a little girl with her. My pulse quickened immediately. Damien continued staring out at the city. I remember almost nothing from that day. Just fragments. A bracelet. A little girl hiding behind Sophia whenever strangers entered the room. His jaw tightened slightly. And a boy. The room seemed to shrink around me. You remember him? Damien nodded once. He looked older than me. Maybe 16. Maybe 17. Protective. Quiet. He never left her side. A chill ran through my body. The same description Margaret had given. The same missing person from the file. What happened to him? I asked. Damien slowly turned back toward me. That is the problem. I do not know. The answer landed heavily between us. For years, he had searched for pieces of a puzzle without realizing I was part of it. And now another missing piece had emerged. A person who might know the truth. My eyes drifted toward the old photograph again. Suddenly, something caught my attention. I picked it up and examined the background more carefully. Trees. Stone steps. The front entrance of the estate. Then I noticed a reflection in one of the windows behind Sophia. Faint. Almost impossible to see. A figure standing inside the house. My heart skipped. Damien. He stepped closer. I pointed toward the glass. Who is that? He leaned down beside me. The reflection was blurry, but a person was clearly visible. Someone watching from inside. Damien's expression changed instantly. That cannot be right. My stomach tightened. You recognize them? For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he answered quietly. Yes. The room felt suddenly colder. Who is it? Damien stared at the photograph as though seeing it for the first time. The man in that reflection attended my family's memorial service 6 months later. I frowned. So, his eyes met mine. And for the first time since this began, I saw genuine concern. Because according to every official record that exists, he was not supposed to know Sophia Romano at all. My eyes remained fixed on the photograph. The reflection was small, almost hidden by the glare on the glass. Yet now that Damien had pointed it out, I could not unsee it. A man standing in the background, watching, present during a moment that officially should never have existed. Who is he? I asked again. Damien slowly sat down across from me. For the first time since I had met him, he looked tired. Not physically tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying questions for too many years. His name is Victor Hale. The name meant nothing to me. Yet the way Damien said it made my pulse quicken. What was his connection to Sophia? Damien shook his head. According to every public record, none. He pointed toward the photograph. But there he is. Silence settled between us. I looked back at the image. Victor Hale. A stranger hiding in the background of a forgotten memory. Somehow, that felt more unsettling than all the missing records. Missing documents could be explained. People made mistakes. Files disappeared. But photographs did not lie. Someone had been there. Someone had been involved. What happened to him? I asked. Damien leaned back slowly. He became one of the most respected financial advisors in the Northeast. Built a reputation. Built connections. Built influence. His expression hardened slightly, and somehow remained connected to every mystery I investigated without ever appearing directly inside any of them. A chill moved through me. You think he knows what happened? I think he knows far more than he ever admitted. My apartment suddenly felt too small, too quiet. Every answer seemed to reveal another hidden door. I rubbed my temples and closed my eyes. That was when it happened. A flash. Brief. Unexpected. A memory. Not a complete memory. Just a fragment. I saw sunlight reflecting off water. A large garden. White roses moving in the wind. A boy's voice. Older. Calm. Protective. Stay close to me, okay? My eyes opened immediately. My breathing quickened. Damien noticed at once. Emily. I stared at the photograph. I remembered something. He leaned forward. What? The image already felt like it was slipping away. A garden. White roses. An older boy. My voice trembled. I think I have heard his voice before. Damien's expression changed instantly. Hope. Real hope. Try to remember. I closed my eyes again. The memory returned for half a second. A warm afternoon. A stone pathway. A hand reaching toward mine. Then it vanished. Gone before I could hold on to it. Frustration washed over me. I cannot. Damien remained silent for several moments. Then he reached into the folder and removed one final document. Unlike the others, this page appeared newer. Recently printed. He placed it carefully on the table between us. I received this 2 hours before I came here. I looked down. At first, I did not understand what I was seeing. Then my breath caught. It was a passenger manifest from 20 years ago. A private flight departing New York. Several names had been redacted. One had not. My eyes widened as I read it. Passenger number 4, Sophia Romano. Passenger number 5, unidentified female child. Passenger number 6, unidentified male juvenile. I looked up at Damien. Neither of us spoke, because for the first time, we had proof that the little girl and the missing boy had been real. And at the bottom of the page, listed as the person who authorized the flight, was a single name. Victor Hale. Neither of us looked away from the passenger manifest. The page lay between us beneath the apartment light, like a final piece of evidence that refused to stay buried. Victor Hale. For the first time, the mysteries surrounding my past had stopped feeling like disconnected fragments. A name, a photograph, a flight, a missing boy. The same person appeared at the center of every road. Damien slowly exhaled and leaned back in his chair. This is enough. I looked up. Enough for what? Enough to stop guessing. His voice remained calm, but something had changed. For days, he had been chasing possibilities. Now he was looking at facts. I glanced toward the window. The city beyond the glass shimmered beneath thousands of lights. Somewhere out, there was a man connected to the disappearance of my identity. Somewhere out, there was someone who knew why a little girl had lost her name. What happens now? I asked. Damien's eyes moved toward the bracelet resting against my wrist. Now we find the truth. The words should have comforted me. Instead, they made my chest tighten. Because the closer I came to answers, the more I feared them. For 27 years, I had built a life. I had patients who trusted me, friends who cared about me, a career I loved. What if the truth destroyed all of it? As if reading my thoughts, Damien spoke quietly. Whatever your name was before, it does not erase who you became. The statement caught me off guard. He was right. The frightened child from the missing records and the woman sitting here tonight were the same person. Both stories belonged to me. I looked down at the photograph of Sophia Romano one last time. Her smile seemed different now, less like a mystery, more like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. Suddenly, another memory surfaced. Clearer this time. I saw white roses again. The garden. The stone pathway. The older boy standing beside me. But now I remembered one more detail. His voice. Not the words. The feeling. Safe. The memory vanished almost immediately, yet it left something behind. A sense of certainty. I had not been abandoned. Someone had tried to protect me. My eyes widened slightly. The boy. Damien looked at me. What about him? I touched the photograph carefully. I do not remember his face yet, but I remember how I felt when he was there. Silence filled the room. Then Damien nodded slowly. Then he mattered. Outside, the first hints of dawn were beginning to appear beyond the skyline. We had spent the entire night chasing ghosts. Yet somehow the darkness felt lighter now. Not because everything had been solved. Quite the opposite. The road ahead remained uncertain. Victor Hale still held answers. The missing years still existed. The boy remained unnamed. But for the first time, I was no longer searching alone. Damien stood and walked toward the door. Before leaving, he paused. When I first saw your bracelet in the hospital, I thought I had found a clue. He looked at me carefully. I was wrong. I frowned. What do you mean? A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. You were never a clue, Emily. His gaze shifted toward the photograph, the documents, and the scattered pieces of my past. You were the answer. After he left, I stood alone in the growing morning light. The bracelet rested against my wrist. The photographs remained spread across the table. And for the first time in my life, I was not afraid of what came next. Because the truth had not taken my identity away. It had given it back. And somewhere beyond the sunrise, the rest of my story was finally waiting to be found.